Lillian Grayson thought she had married the perfect man, but Warren Holloway had a secret so horrifying it would turn her love into terror. Lillian Gray believed she had found the perfect love story. When she first met Warren Daxton at a charity event for medical professionals, she was immediately drawn to him. He was intelligent, well-spoken, and carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. Unlike the men she had dated before, Warren had a mysterious quality about him that intrigued her. He was a forensic pathologist, a profession she found both admirable and intimidating. While the idea of working with the dead made her uneasy, she respected his dedication to science. Warren spoke passionately about his work, often emphasizing the importance of understanding death to uncover the truth. She admired his commitment and saw him as a man who sought justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Their relationship progressed quickly. Warren was affectionate but never overly emotional. He preferred deep conversations over small talk and had an uncanny ability to read her thoughts before she even spoke. Lillian found comfort in his presence, believing she had finally met someone who truly understood her. Within 6 months, he proposed during a quiet evening at their favorite restaurant. There was no grand gesture, no elaborate display, just a simple, heartfelt question, and she had no hesitation in saying yes. To her, Warren was the perfect man, and their life together seemed like it was destined for happiness. The wedding was small and intimate, just as Warren had wanted. He wasn't fond of large crowds or excessive attention. Lillian didn't mind. She was just happy to be his wife. Their honeymoon was short, only a weekend at a secluded cabin by the lake. Warren claimed he had work obligations that couldn't be postponed, and although she was slightly disappointed, she reassured herself that his job required sacrifice. After all, forensic pathologists dealt with the most difficult aspects of life and death. Once they moved into their new home, Lillian noticed small details that struck her as odd. Warren had specific rules about cleanliness, particularly around his personal belongings. He kept his home office locked at all times, explaining that it contained confidential case files. She respected his privacy, but curiosity lingered in the back of her mind. His work schedule was unpredictable. Some nights he would leave their bed well past midnight, claiming he had been called in for urgent examinations. His scent often carried a strange clinical sterility, as though he had spent hours in an environment devoid of life. Warren was affectionate in his own way, but something about him felt distant, as if a part of him existed in a world she would never fully understand. When she tried to ask about his cases, he would skillfully change the subject or offer vague answers. Lillian convinced herself that every marriage had its mysteries, that perhaps Warren was simply a man who valued his work too much. She trusted him. She loved him. And she had no idea that the man she had married was hiding something too horrifying for her to even imagine. Lillian tried to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping into her mind, but it became harder as the days passed. Warren's habits grew more peculiar, and she found herself questioning things she had previously brushed aside. He had always been secretive, but now his behavior bordered on paranoia. He double-checked locks, kept his phone close at all times, and became noticeably tense whenever she entered certain rooms in the house. There was one room in particular, an office he rarely used, that remained locked at all times. She had never seen inside, and whenever she asked about it, Warren would dismiss her with a reassuring smile, telling her it was just for storage. Despite his explanations, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, while tidying up the bedroom, She came across one of Warren's work shirts in the laundry. As she lifted it, a small plastic bag slipped from the pocket. Her breath caught in her throat as she picked it up. Inside was a single, latex glove stained with a dark, dried substance. At first she tried to convince herself it was nothing unusual. Warren worked with cadavers. Blood, bodily fluids, and chemicals were a part of his job. But why would he bring something like this home? And why would he hide it? She debated confronting him, but decided against it. If she was wrong, she didn't want to come across as distrustful. Instead, she paid closer attention to his routines. His late-night absences became more frequent, and each time he left, he would return in the early morning hours, exhausted but oddly exhilarated. His clothes smelled faintly of antiseptic mixed with something else she couldn't quite place. He would shower immediately, scrubbing himself as if trying to erase any lingering traces of where he had been. Curiosity turned into quiet investigation. One afternoon, when Warren was at work, Lillian searched the house for anything that might explain his behavior. She started in his office, rifling through papers and drawers, but everything appeared normal. Then she noticed the locked cabinet in the corner. It was heavy, made of dark wood, and had a small keyhole. She had never seen Warren open it before, and a sense of dread settled in her stomach. She didn't have the key, but as she inspected the nearby desk, she found a small silver one tucked inside a pen holder. Her hands trembled as she inserted it into the lock. Inside, she found folders filled with photographs. At first, they looked like standard autopsy images, victims of crimes, medical examinations. But as she flipped through them, her heart began to race. The bodies in the photos weren't positioned like typical medical records. They were arranged in unnatural, disturbing ways. Some of the images looked posed, as if someone had carefully positioned them for a purpose far beyond forensic documentation. She slammed the folder shut, her pulse hammering in her ears. What had she just found? Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. Warren wasn't just studying the dead, he was doing something much worse. Lillian's hands shook as she placed the folder back inside the cabinet, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might give her away. The images she had seen were burned into her mind, bodies arranged in unnatural, intimate ways, their lifeless expressions frozen in something far worse than death. She wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that Warren had some professional reason for possessing such horrific photographs. But deep inside, she knew the truth was much darker. The man she had married was not who she thought he was. She hurriedly locked the cabinet, placing the key back where she had found it, and forced herself to act normal. She had to be careful. If Warren suspected anything, she had no idea how he would react. That night, she barely slept. She lay in bed beside him, feeling his steady breathing, aware of every small movement he made. She tried to convince herself that she was wrong, that there had to be an explanation for everything. But every time she closed her eyes, the images resurfaced. The next day, she decided she needed more proof. She couldn't go to the police with just photographs. Warren could easily claim they were part of his forensic work. She needed something undeniable, something that would expose him for what he truly was. She began paying close attention to his late-night routines, memorizing the times he left and returned. She noted how he always carried a black duffel bag, when he left, only to return with it empty. What was he doing during those hours? One night, when Warren announced he had to leave for an urgent case, she knew this was her chance. As soon as he was gone, she searched through his belongings, looking for anything she might have missed. In the back of his closet, hidden beneath a pile of old clothes, she found a small locked box. It was heavier than she expected, and panic twisted in her stomach as she searched for a way to open it. She tried several keys she had found around the house, but none worked. Frustrated but determined, she used a screwdriver to pry it open. The lid gave way with a sharp crack, and what she found inside made her stomach churn. Inside were trinkets, rings, bracelets, torn pieces of fabric, all carefully wrapped in plastic. She unwrapped one of the items, a delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant. It looked old, tarnished, yet oddly preserved. Then she noticed the photographs. Unlike the ones in the cabinet, these weren't medical images. They were personal. Women, lifeless and pale, captured in dimly lit rooms. Some were posed, their eyes closed as if in sleep, while others had expressions frozen in fear. Lillian dropped the box, bile rising in her throat. These weren't strangers from forensic cases. These were trophies. Terror gripped her as she realized the truth. Warren wasn't just fascinated by the dead, he was collecting them. And she was living with a monster. Lillian's breath came in shallow gasps as she stumbled away from the box, her mind reeling from the horror she had just uncovered. The photographs, the trinkets, each item told a story, a grim narrative of Warren's secret life. These were trophies from real victims, women who had been alive once, who had lives, families, and dreams. Now they were nothing more than pieces in his grotesque collection. She fought the overwhelming urge to vomit, knowing she had to act quickly. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she considered calling the police. But then she hesitated. Warren was careful, methodical. If the police didn't believe her, or if they needed time to build a case, it could give him a chance to cover his tracks. Worse, if he found out she knew, she had no idea what he was capable of. She had been sleeping beside a predator, sharing meals with him, loving him. The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. Her mind raced through her options. She needed solid proof, something that would make it impossible for Warren to explain away. The photographs were sickening, but they alone wouldn't be enough. She needed to catch him in the act. It was a dangerous thought, but she saw no other way. That night, she acted as if nothing had changed. She cooked dinner, laughed at his dry humor, and even kissed him goodnight. Every moment felt like a lie, but she forced herself to play the part. If he suspected anything, she knew she might not live to see the next day. The next time Warren left in the middle of the night, Lillian followed him. She waited a few minutes after he drove away, then grabbed the spare keys to his car and took her own vehicle, trailing him at a safe distance. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had no idea what she was about to witness, but she knew she had to be strong. Warren drove through the city, eventually turning down a desolate road leading toward an abandoned morgue on the outskirts of town. Lillian's stomach twisted as she parked a safe distance away, watching as he unlocked the building and disappeared inside. For a moment, she debated leaving. She could go straight to the police, tell them what she had seen, but something inside her told her she needed to see for herself. Taking a deep breath, she crept toward the entrance, slipping inside silently. The air inside was thick with the scent of chemicals and decay. She followed the dim glow of a single light down a long hallway, her pulse hammering in her ears. When she reached the room at the end of the corridor, she peered inside, and what she saw made her body freeze in sheer terror. Warren stood over a lifeless woman, her body unnaturally arranged on a cold metal table. He wasn't examining her. He was admiring her. Lillian's entire body locked in place, her breath caught in her throat as she watched Warren. His movements were slow, deliberate, his gloved hands brushing against the woman's pale skin as if she were something fragile, something to be cherished. But there was nothing tender about it. There was only depravity. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her feet refused to move. She felt as though she had stepped into a nightmare, one she could never wake up from. The reality was far worse than she had imagined. He wasn't just fascinated by the dead, he loved them. The thought made her stomach churn, but she swallowed the bile rising in her throat. She had to get out of there before he noticed her. She took a careful step backward, her foot nudged a loose piece of metal. The sharp clang echoed through the morgue like a gunshot. Warren's head snapped up. For a moment there was silence. Then he turned slowly, his face shadowed under the dim light. Lillian bolted. She sprinted down the hallway, her heart beat, pounding so violently she thought it might burst from her chest. Behind her, she could hear the rapid footsteps of Warren chasing after her. He was fast. Much faster than she expected. She pushed through the heavy morgue door and ran straight to her car. Her fingers fumbled for the keys as she threw herself inside, but before she could start the engine, a force yanked the door open. Warren's hand clamped around her wrist, his grip like steel. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, soulless eyes, held no traces of the man she had once loved. There was no anger, no panic, just cold calculation. He knew. He knew she had seen everything, and now she knew too much. Lillian's survival instincts kicked in. She reached for the glove compartment, her fingers wrapping around the cold metal. Of the handgun she had stashed days ago when the suspicions first crept in. She hadn't been sure she would need it, but now, as Warren's grip tightened, she knew this was her only chance. She pulled the trigger. The first shot struck his shoulder, sending him staggering back. But he didn't fall. He lunged at her. Again, his face twisting into something monstrous. She fired again. And again. Her mind blurred as she emptied the magazine, each shot fueled by pure terror. The sound of gunfire shattered the silence of the night, ringing in her ears long after the bullets stopped. Warren's body slumped against the side of the car, blood pooling beneath him. His eyes, once so calculated, stared blankly ahead. The weight of what she had done crashed over her. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911, barely able to speak through her sobs. But even as she told the dispatcher what had happened, she felt no regret. She had uncovered a monster, and she had stopped him before he could claim another victim.